Hello, welcome to the AIMHO region. My name is Letha. I am from the University of New Mexico. I'm also a member of the ProDevo Experience Committee and one of the two hosts bringing you today's recording of the virtual job search panel. As I said, my name is Letha. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am from the University of New Mexico. But I'm going to turn it over to my co-host to give her introduction. And then after that, our panel of guests, esteemed guests, will also introduce themselves. So passing it to Ange.
Hi all, my name's Ange. I'm from the University of Nevada, Reno, and my pronouns are she, hers. I am also on the ProDevo Experience Committee, and I am enjoying my time with Letha as we host our virtual job search panel.
All right, so to our panelists, please introduce yourself, including your pronouns, your host institution, and department or position that you hold at your host institution. And if you're a volunteer or you have a leadership position with AIMHO, let us know that as well.
Good morning. My name is Ashley Unmacht. I use she, her pronouns. I'm currently at the University of Arizona, where I'm a community director for housing and residential life.
Hi all, my name is Biko Bloom-Fisher. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I work at the University of Utah in housing residential education. And I also serve on the AIMHO DSJ, which is Diversity and Social Justice Committee.
Hi everyone, my name is Michael Palacios. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm at the University of Nevada, Reno, where I serve as an assistant director for student conduct and safety. And right now I am the Nevada SPR and I serve on the AIMHO marketing committee as well too.
All right. And thank you all for being here, our esteemed panel of guests. You all are here because you had success doing a virtual job search, which landed you in the positions that you're in now. So the first question that we're going to ask, what were some of the benefits of participating in a virtual search process?
I can share first. I think the biggest one for me was being able to be in my own normal routine. Obviously, last year at this time, we're still getting adjusted to pandemic life, but being able to sleep in my own bed the night before and have plans for my own meals and not have to be concerned with those like basic living things was really nice and just way less stressful than I imagine it probably would be if I was somewhere else.
I'll go next. My favorite part of or I guess some of the biggest benefits of the virtual search process is one, definitely gonna reiterate Ashley's point on comfort. I will be honest, for a lot of interviews, I was looking good up top and then I was wearing shorts during virtual interviews because gotta be comfortable. But also it's a good way to stick it to like the professionalism, arena that we all work to deconstruct in our own ways. And I would say the other big one is finances, not having to worry about paying for a whole bunch of different outfits. Some universities, when you fly out there, it's either you accept the job or you're paying for your ticket and all that. And when it gets complicated and we all know finances can be tight with our positions, it was really, really nice not having that barrier either when I was doing my search last year.
I'll say the big thing for me was time. Being in a professional job, like full-time job before this, I would have to take time off for any interviews I had. And so taking 2 to 3 days time off for an on-campus to fly there the day before, fly back the day after type of thing was just going to be a lot for me. And like, it was like, okay, how am I going to manage this? But since a lot of the stuff was virtual, it was a lot less time off. It was like, you can take a half day because not many schools were doing full days, or you can only had to take 1 day because you didn't have to worry about that travel time back and forth to wherever you were interviewing.
Great, thanks everyone. Our next question is, if you were not able to physically visit the campus for a position, how did this impact your decision to join or not join that team?
I can start off here. So for me, being physically in a space doesn't impact me as much as how well I feel like I will fit within the department. And fit maybe isn't the best word because we all know that fit is rooted in whiteness and a lot of other it is problematic in its own ways. But for me, how well do I vibe with the people that I'll be working with and how much agency do I think that they'll give me to do my job successfully? That's most important to me. having been in grad school in the Deep South and gone to the Midwest for different schools, knowing that I can fit in a lot of different areas, I can do most spaces physically. And I also recognize the privilege in being able to say that, because that's not the same for everyone. But I need to know that the department I'm going to work within is going to support me and allow me to push and achieve and continue to create opportunities for those around me as well. So physical spaces didn't matter as much to me as the team that I was going to be working on.
I think with that, physical spaces weren't something that took the forefront, which I think can be a good thing. And so being able to focus on potential relationships I'd build with future colleagues and not being distracted by some of those physical space things is nice. But obviously with that, it is more difficult not being able to see the area. I think especially for institutions that aren't in like booming metropolis areas with like traditionally like lots of stuff to do and stuff for everyone, that makes it harder of a sell as a candidate to accept a job at a place that you haven't been.
I think also for me, I know it took a lot more intentionality, especially on the questions and stuff I was asking in the interviews I was in. Because typically, again, when you're in that on campus, you have a host, you're just kind of walking around campus, you have like casual conversation, and you can like infer a lot from what those casual conversations were. But over Zoom, that wasn't the case for a lot of them. So I remember I had to be very intentional about like, okay, I'm going to think about all the questions I want to ask. What are some of the like maybe like not so like important questions I would ask in an interview and ask like a host? I want to make sure I ask those in the interview as well too. And so for me, it was just making sure I planned that out to get the information I wanted out of everyone I was meeting with during the interview process.
Thank you. So what are some unique challenges presented by an entirely virtual process? And maybe even what are some ways that hiring managers can mitigate those challenges?
I can start off here. I have a list. I'm sorry. I was like, let me write all this stuff down to get ready for this. My biggest thing, and I think I'd like tell a lot of people, like grads and professionals I'm working with who are looking at job interviewing right now, is time zones. I think as a hiring manager, that's like the biggest thing you need to take into account. I had a few interviews for East Coast schools and they wanted to start at like 8 or 9 a.m. and I was on Pacific time. And I was like, you want me to get up at 5 or 6 a.m. to start this interview? Excuse me, do you know I'm not a morning person? Like, let's be real. And so I think as a hiring manager, you need to keep that in mind. And along with those time zones, does a full day of interviews benefit the candidate and the hiring department or institution? Because I think that's where time zones come a lot into play, where again, East Coast school wants to do a full day 9 to 5 interview, but you have someone on the West Coast, or even vice versa. Someone on the West Coast wants to do full 9 to 5, East Coast person, that's going into their evening later in the day type of thing. And so I think that was a big thing for me. The other thing was navigating technology. A lot of schools use Zoom, and I think probably most of us, if not all of us, know how to use Zoom by now. But I had some schools use Cisco WebEx, use Teams and stuff like that, and I wasn't as familiar with those like softwares. And so, how can they provide tutorials or information before the interview to say, like, hey, this is the software we use. Here's how you navigate the software. Here's how you download it. Here's how you're going to use it. And so, because I know I was like, when I heard Cisco WebEx, I was like, what the hell is this? I've never used this. It was a pain to download. I had no idea what to do. And so just making sure you're doing that kind of thing. And then I think the last thing I had was, especially for those who are in the interview process, like don't judge, I guess, or don't pay so much attention to what's going on in the background. Because for a lot of us as candidates, we're in our personal space, and that's great because it's comforting for us, but then we're inviting people we could potentially work with in our personal spaces. And so if you hear cats, if you hear dogs, if you hear children in the background, like don't take that against the candidate, because again, we're in this personal space that we have. Or it's like there are some candidates who have very like cluttered backgrounds because like that's the only place they can place a desk in their apartment or wherever they're at, and they don't have multiple places like where it's going to look good. This is the best place that looks my apartment. So if they have a white sheet up behind them, okay, they have a white sheet up behind them. That hopefully doesn't bother the people involved in the interview process, because again, hopefully you're not taking that into account when that like interviewing someone of like what their background looks like. But that's it for me.
I think similarly, the background piece was something I thought about quite a bit. Even down to the fact a lot of candidates were using their current office spaces. And so, traditionally you're sharing a physical space with your employer, but when you're in your office at your current institution, or at home, obviously, like you have students that could think that you're available at that time as much as you let them know that you're not available. And along with that, like things down to fire alarms was something I was really nervous about. And so as an employer, making a contingency plan and communicating that with candidates of, if there are Wi-Fi issues, like, text me, let me know, and have a point person to communicate with when something shuts down. Because on one person's end, that might happen, and it could happen on the employer's end too. And so just making it clear and having backups to the backups.
Yeah, lots of, amazing points that I don't want to reiterate too much, but I guess some unique ones that I would make are, one, there were some schools I interviewed with where they had a pre-recorded interview process where you had to send in a pre-recording and through a certain kind of program or module. And some of those you couldn't like create a second recording. So it's one shot, like this is it. And I remember I was doing one of them and like halfway through the Wi-Fi cut out. And so like my camera froze and I think they could still hear me. And I definitely like cussed a little bit and it was like, well, this is it. I'm pretty sure like my internet's done. And then I just didn't finish the interview because I was like, yeah, we're just gonna cut that one there. So recognizing that if you're gonna have a pre-recorded process or something, those don't always go how we hope they would. And then the second thing I would say, and I reflected a lot on privilege here again, where I was fortunate that generally I would have stable Wi-Fi. And we all know, especially live on staff, that university Wi-Fi can be really hit or miss. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's like, really, is there Wi-Fi here? And that can factor into a lot of nerves on the candidate side. Exactly what Ashley was saying. I did have a fire alarm go off during one of the interviews and I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. But that's just kind of the nature of the world we're in right now. So definitely giving grace and then recognizing the privileges of technology access gaps. Sorry, that's my laundry machine that just went off in the back. Didn't expect that. But just like that. So the technology access gap, and especially how that falls along racial lines of people in different areas that have access to quality technology resources, is all the research and everything's out there. So I'm not going to give that information on here, but that would be my advice.
Thanks, everybody. And, we touched on this a little bit, but I do want to ask this question as well. How can hiring managers create a more inclusive and accessible search process?
I think something that stood out to me in my process were the institutions that were able to offer up information about their institutions for the experiences that you'd be missing out on, so to speak, from an interview. I feel like there were a lot of interviews I did where it relied on me as the candidate, as folks have already shared, like to ask a bunch of questions, which is pretty stressful to put it on me. And so I was trying to like have these robust lists to make sure I was getting a full picture. And so any sort of like talking points or things that folks can prepare to give candidates a good idea of what their department is, and just what their experience will be like, I think can put them ahead and also just really help the candidate out in making sure they're not going to end up accepting a position that's not the right fit because they didn't think to ask the right questions.
Another thing that I would say too alongside that is, traditionally, if you're going to on campus, you're going to see different affinity spaces or areas on campus where you'll meet people of all types of backgrounds. I know for me as a person of color, like that matters a lot, being able to see myself and around other people that either look like me or can relate to marginalized experiences. And so if you're doing things virtually, being intentional about knowing the identities of the people that are in the room and being able to read the room and what kind of support we might need. So even if it's just sending a question out of like, who would you like to meet on campus? What kind of spaces are important for you on campus, and bring people from those departments or areas to meet you in the group. That would be really, really cool to see schools do that. And then the other thing is, I love when interviewers share questions beforehand. That gives me time to process certain things, certainly, and see it just makes it a lot easier for me to engage with the content and with the folks in the room.
Yes, I would second that. I highly encourage people to share questions if they can. I know some HR policies don't allow that, but like even some schools where like 15 minutes before your interview, we're going to share the questions with you. And that was even very helpful as well too, where some schools were like, here's the interview questions for 2 weeks away. And it's like, great, here's some of these questions. I think another big thing as well too, and I know a lot of schools need to work on this, people need to update their websites. Like if we're going to be virtual, if I'm going to find information, I need an updated website, not a website from 2000 that tells me what's going on at this institute, like this department. And I think that goes beyond just like the housing. I think that's like university wide. And so like my hope is that with this time of a lot of things being virtual, like how can we update our websites to make sure that they are accessible for everyone and they have up-to-date information? The other thing I would say too is making sure that you're providing opportunities for people to see campus. And for those positions that are live on, make sure you have a recording of what a live on accommodation looks like on your campus, because that's a big part for someone who's going to be live on of like, where am I going to live? What's it going to look like? And so how can you offer those opportunities? And then the last thing I have is if you are requiring a presentation of a candidate over Zoom is very awkward already, but please make sure you encourage those who are part of that to have their cameras on. Because as someone who has been in a space where I presented for an interview, which is already nerve-wracking, and then to have no one have their cameras on, it's like, what's going on? And like, I know it's like hard for some people, facial expressions and technology and stuff like that, but for the most part, like encourage your staff who are part of those opportunities to turn their camera on. Because again, if you're in person, you're not hiding behind a screen whenever you're doing an in-person presentation. It's like if you're on virtual, please have your cameras on so that the candidate can have that. And like, if there are question opportunities, make sure people know that before coming into a presentation space. One of the most awkward thing I went and they're like, you can ask questions to those in the audience. I was like, okay, and asked a question and no one answered. And I was like, did they know I could ask questions or did they not know? And so just making sure people know what the process is also from those like who are interviewing someone, so they are prepared as well too for the process.
In the same vein, in making sure that they're prepared, even letting them know like the order that they'll be asking questions or assigning someone to take the lead, just because I had a few times as a candidate where that was unclear, and I was trying to figure out if it made sense for me to speak up or what was happening. And so making sure that someone in the space besides the candidate has ownership over it.
I don't know if y'all can tell, but I'm like taking notes. So we're not even done, but like, thank y'all. Okay. So we kind of talked about this just a second ago with the website, but what are some ways that you all went about gathering information about the campus or the department that you were interviewing with?
I think besides going on websites, which again snaps to some folks really need to update their information, especially again for live on positions. Like I love being able to see where I'm going to live. And if the picture is from like 1998, then there's some problems. We need some updates. But other than that, you know, social media, recognizing that social media has a lot of positives and negatives, knowing that employers are going to look at my social media and sometimes use that to base judgments on who I am or what I might bring. So looking at social media and what kind of feedback students are giving about departments or environments, and noticing trends. If students from certain identities are sharing certain experiences that are very similar, that seem to be more of a systemic issue, I want to ask about that. And I need the university to be able to tell me like, yeah, this is a problem and this is what we're doing to work on it, or this is how we envision trying to remedy some of these problems. And I think the big thing I noticed through all that is some folks would really speak out of their depths in interviews. So if I notice there's a problem on, you know, someone's Twitter where a lot of students are sharing about the same kind of experience, and I ask about it and someone just really starts speaking to speak, they get lost in the sauce. They're like, yeah, social justice, diversity, this is why it matters. And like, you can tell they don't know what they're saying. I don't need all that. Like if you don't know, or if you haven't looked at the issue strategically as a department, say that. Just tell me up front, because the minute someone starts speaking out of key and it doesn't doesn't feel like they're being authentic or that their knowledge in certain areas isn't where it needs to be, I'm gonna start having questions, and you need to sell yourself to me as an employer as much as I need to sell myself to you as a potential candidate. So those were some ways that I work to gather information.
Yes, research. I literally at like every school, like I just like did like a deep dive into everything. One thing I found really helpful with social media is YouTube. Many students at a college campus record a vlog of like day in the life of that's like not university sponsored. It's unfiltered. They're going to give you their true thoughts about what a day in the life is at a university. And so that helped me a lot. Even though I'm not a student and not going to be going through the classes, it was like, okay, what are some of your concerns you have? Or what are some issues that you're bringing up? And so that was very helpful. Many universities also have their own university YouTube channel. Again, that's going to be very scripted though, so may not give you a deep insight, but it's at least helpful to understand some context. And this is something I did even before the pandemic. Go to the school newspaper, see what the headlines are, see what's going on campus, because again, those students are going to write what's going on. And I'd even encourage you to go to some of the local newspapers as well too. Because for many universities, they're like the shining star of that city, and everything that happens on that campus is going to be in their local newspaper or local television station. So that also helps as well too. And I think the last thing is like, don't be afraid to ask some of those questions of like, if you're a professional of color, like ask, what is it like for a professional of color at this institution? If you're someone who wants to dye your hair bright pink, hey, if I want to dye my hair bright pink, is that going to be okay at this institution? Whatever those questions are that you're trying to like, you want to know about that you may not be able to infer because you're not on campus, ask those questions and don't feel like you can't. And you should hopefully feel like you can ask those at multiple levels. So from the student interview all the way up to the department leadership, university leadership, ask those types of questions and see how they vary across the different levels of the department. Because again, hopefully that gives you some insight as well too of how well the department's doing.
I wholeheartedly agree with the sentiments that have been shared. The only thing I would add, for me, the biggest asset, honestly, in learning about the university was TikTok. Searching hashtags of the university and even the city, and just seeing from students' perspectives what was going on. And a lot of them are like goofy and way even less scripted than like vlog style YouTube videos. Really apparent. And even for me as a, looking at live-in positions, there are a lot of RAs on TikTok too. And so seeing their experiences was really helpful and pretty fun, honestly.
Thanks, everybody. So as we wrap up our panel, our last question for you all is, what advice would you give to those entering the virtual job search this year?
I think the big thing I would say is prepare as if it were in person. So I like, hopefully for any of you, you're preparing, but like, I would say, don't feel like because it's virtual that it's going to be easier or less stressful than if you were in person, because I think it's still going to be very stressful being virtual. So make sure you prepare for that. Get comfortable. I know it was mentioned of like wearing shorts and the top was professional, the bottom wasn't. If that works for you, that works for you. If you're like, that's not going to work for me, I need to be fully dressed up and my 8-inch heels, everything buttoned up, everything ready to go, then do that. So do whatever's going to make you comfortable and like present yourself the best as you do these interviews. And then the last thing, like from the last question, research. Just do your research as much as you can. There's a lot, again, on the internet, and we're lucky, I think, with technology, there's a lot going on, but just make sure you do as much research as you can to prepare for whatever is coming your way with the interviews that you have.
Yes, I think for me, thinking about preparation for interviews, making sure you have like snacks and meals planned out, and utilizing your time if you're given breaks during virtual on-campus or virtual interviews in general. If you have a long day ahead of you, making sure you're getting up. I made sure in those break times to be blasting music and like moving my body, because that's what I needed to keep my energy up through the day. Even like simple things like going to the bathroom, getting drinks of water, that stuff matters and really was impactful in making sure I was keeping my energy up and noticing that throughout those experiences. So doing things like that, even down to making your environment really serve you. And so that for me even looked like taping something right behind my camera, so I would be able to focus on that and make like pseudo eye contact over Zoom better during that time.
Yeah, the biggest thing that I would say, and definitely I can give this lens to folks that are leaving graduate programs and looking for the first full-time positions, is advocate for yourself as much as possible. Advocate for your time, because your departments have likely told you they're here to support you in your journey to get your degrees, but then also looking forward. So now's the time to cash that in. Say, y'all said you were gonna give me this time. This is the time I need for preparation for myself. Advocate to your potential employers if you need an accommodation of some sort, if you need materials in advance for one reason or the other, or your Wi-Fi is kind of funky, like we talked about earlier. Advocate, because ultimately it's not always going to be an equitable process or easy process in a lot of interviews, and that's a fault of the schools without a doubt. So it shouldn't have to be the onus on you to advocate, but sometimes like that's what we got to do to make things happen and make changes for ourselves. So advocate for yourself, because ultimately you are in the position to interview for a lot of good reasons, and you are the result of a lot of dreams and a lot of hard work. And so make the most of that opportunity and advocate whatever way you got to make that, to get that job, get paid, make that money, because that's what we got to do, right?
One more thing I will add too is about time. Like, know your limit when it comes with that. Like, if there's like 2 half-day on-campus interviews and you can do them in the same day, that's great. If you know you can't, then don't do that. If you know you need a day or two in between those longer interview days, then take that time and, like, again, communicate, advocate for yourself of like, nope, I can't do that Monday. Can we move it to maybe Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever it may be? Just know your limit, because again, Zoom fatigue is real. And like, you don't want to start mixing up schools, especially if you're doing like 2 in the same day, or you don't want to be tired the next day. If you already had the full day of interviews the day before and then next day you have another one, are you going to be tired or are you going to be exhausted? So again, make sure you understand your limits whenever it comes to that Zoom fatigue, because it's real.
I feel like in the spring, last spring, I was always saying like, oh, I have the interview in the morning, but I can work in the afternoon. Making sure you're taking time, like you can take the whole day if you like work with your current employer, if that's a situation, and don't put too much on yourself, even though you're still in that physical space, like you still deserve a day and to decompress after the long day on Zoom.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much. I do want to take some time to thank our panelists for taking some time out of their day for yet another Zoom meeting. So always appreciate the time people spend virtually with us. As we wrap up, for those watching, just a reminder to be on the lookout for more professional development experiences through AIMHO. A lot of our opportunities are shared through our listserv as well as our Instagram. So just a quick plug to follow us at AIMHO Region on Instagram, and follow us and view any webinars or recorded panels on our YouTube channel as well. So thank you again. Thanks everybody. And thanks to my co-host Letha as well.